My name is JJ Asgar, and I'm going to be talking about an introduction to leveraging AI for your enterprise. It's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm going to leverage some things around something called instructlab and a few other things, but hopefully we're going to have a nice little bit of fun time, and we're going to learn some stuff. If you've never really touched AI or still looking for some foundational knowledge, yes, that was supposed to be funny. Hopefully you'll find it funny later. You'll hopefully gain it from this talk. I'm going to shoot through a few things pretty quickly, but hopefully you'll be able to see from the ground up how to start thinking about AI in a different way, which will allow you to leverage it specifically for your enterprise or for your business opportunities. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what is this talk actually about, right? The world of AI is massive. It's not just only data scientists anymore. There's a bunch of other different people now involved. There's engineers like me. And it's not just a bunch of Jupyter notebooks anymore. There's now a lot of different interfaces to it. There's ChatGPT. There's different paces and ways to interface inside the actual AI ecosystem too. There's going to be terms and topics that you've probably heard in conversation, but honestly, most people don't really know what they are. So my job here is to kind of hopefully level set this conversation. And so when you hear these terms, you'll be a little bit more confident to be able to understand what the portions they're talking about so you can leverage it in your spaces. And hopefully this will give you the foundation so you can go along and explore this world yourself, because it is ever growing, and frankly, it can be very overwhelming when you first step into it. On that note, hopefully you've noticed some of these logos before. You'll probably see the ChatGPT one up in the top left-hand corner there. You probably see OpenAI before. There's a chance you may have seen the Hugging Face one. The one in the middle is something called instructlab, which, as you saw at the beginning, this is kind of the core conversation I want to have today. And then there's Watson X right there behind me. I'd be remiss not to mention a Watson X, because that is the enterprise-grade AI system from IBM. And it has taken the enterprise ecosystem by storm. It allows you to have true sovereign AI in the sense of where AI can fit for your enterprise. And it is designed for the enterprise ecosystem. It is an ever-changing environment, which is great. So go to watsonx.ai, I believe, is the main URL to check it out. The TLDR of it, just because I need to talk about Watson X to make sure that we understand it fully, is the ability to have a straightforward interface to your AI work, right? Standard APIs and in your own secured environment, where you know for a fact that the software that it'll be trained on is from yours and also the models that IBM's lawyers will be able to say, yes, this is your data. One of the challenges with AI as a whole is when we get into more of the conversation, you'll quickly learn that some of the competitors out there, they claim things, but there's no way to verify it. With Watson X, you can verify these things. From an enterprise standpoint, this is obviously a huge value add, right? Because you'll be able to say that absolutely 110% this data is from my data and it didn't leak out to, for instance, a customer or an entity from another part of the planet. So out of all those logos, you probably know the one that probably stuck out to you most was this thing called Hugging Face. What is Hugging Face? Hugging Face is become the de facto standard or the GitHub of the models online. There's also data sets and there's a few other things, but it's become the location where the AI ecosystem is kind of coalesced. So kind of like how GitHub was, where developers show up to show off their code. Hugging Face is the location for data scientists and people playing with models to kind of share their models in a free environment. They've also written some wonderful wrappers and interfaces to build off these publicly accessible open source models, which we'll be playing with here in a little bit. And it really does help making the AI on-ramp much easier. And we're going to be talking about the open source models in this talk. watsonx, which is the next slide, has a bunch of proprietary models that you can use also. But again, watsonx is designed for enterprises and is as a whole. But if you're just trying to spend your time in this space and learn this work, you really should understand the foundations first, which is what we're going to be talking to. And that brings us to instructlab. Instructlab is a project came out of IBM Research and now has been handed over to Red Hat, where this is a easily accessible way of fine-tuning models with your own data, your own knowledge and skills. And that probably doesn't mean a lot to you right now, but the beauty of it is that it really is, we've really tried to create a way that you don't need to be a data scientist to start giving models the ability to learn from your data sets in a more efficient manner. And we'll play with it at the end of this talk to kind of show you how easy it is to set up. And then hopefully it'll be enough for you to go down this path and explore it a little more, or maybe even join our community to be able to come around and help us out, which would be really cool. So let's talk about some AI terms, right? Like I've already thrown some terms out, and there's a very strong possibility you may have heard some of the words I've said before, but you may not fully know what they all are, right? This whole ecosystem is they're brand new terms or terms that are overloaded constantly in this space. So let's break them down. Most people think that AI is still just all crazy math and weird vectors and stuff like that. But if you're just taking it as a consumer or you want to just fine tune some things, all you need to know is a handful of terms to understand where you need to focus in on the conversation to be successful. If you're just looking to not program and just consume, as I said, these are the terms you really should be aware of. And think of this as learning how to use Microsoft Word instead of having to program Microsoft Word, right? Like you wouldn't want to program Microsoft Word from the ground up. You just want to spin it up and do some word processing. You don't have to like know how to design it or build it. So hopefully that makes sense. So I threw this term around a couple times, but let's actually talk what a model is, right? Like a model is it can mean different things to different people. Like a model of a weather or a model for a train or whatever. But in the AI space, it is the black box, right? It is where most people think of as the brain of an AI system, right? You can take what you do is it builds off a bunch of different data sets, and then it has enough of a roundabout knowledge, right? And it figures out and tries to guess to the highest percentage possible of what you are trying to ask it, right? That is actually one reason why math is so bad for models, is because it has so much knowledge. I'm not going to use the word intelligence because it's not really intelligent. It's using percentages to kind of guess what you are looking for. That's why when you use an AI model like ChatGPT or watsonx or whatever, you'll notice that it comes out in single words. It's because it's trying to guess to see what the next sentence or the next word is to what you were trying to get from it. That's that generative text from AI. That's why when you try to use math with it, it doesn't really know because it's already forgotten what it already said. It brings in context windows and things like that, but it's important to recognize that AI models are just basically text. Right now, they're basically text generators, right? So it tries to figure out what you're trying to ask for. So it's the brain of everything. It's the binary blob that gets shipped around the place too, that goes out and finds the stuff. You can create these also and fine tune these and train this. That's kind of what we're getting to eventually. But it's important to recognize that this is the core portion of what AI is the model. But with every model, like for instance, if you go to Hugging Face, you'll notice that there's very different ones tuned, and they're built in different ways. And that's where this data set comes in, right? So if the model is a binary blob of the brain, right? The brain. The data set is the source code, if you're trying to use the metaphor a little bit farther. So it crunches a bunch of these data sets, which usually are CSV files, believe it or not, and it puts it all into one big like collection of information, and it creates a bunch of different what they call vectors or points off of this. That's that 3B or 12B. That's billion different vectors in different places where it becomes a multi-dimensional database of information, and they go out and when the model is asked a question, it takes it and goes out and looks and tries to figure out where you are trying to ask that in that different matrix, and outputs the answer compared to that, which is hard to conceptualize, but that's pretty much what it's doing. But that also brings in the question is those data sets, how do we know like if it's good data, right? Because the model only knows what it knows about, right? I mean, I know how that sounds, but think about that for a second. If you give it garbage data, it only knows garbage, right? So that's one of the reasons why the source code here is so important. And when you're training these models using these data sets, you actually usually split your data into a 70-30 split, where you train it with 70% of the data out there, and then you use 30% of it to verify that it's coming back with the right answer. Okay, obviously you can switch those numbers around a little bit, but the idea is you have a bunch of clean data, which is one of the reasons why IBM is so heavily invested in this space, because we have a bunch of good, clean data for this stuff. And then you turn around and you make sure that it comes out with what you expect. And that's really, really important. So bear that in mind. So I kept using this term training over here and there, but let's actually talk about what is actually training. It's the actual computation that creates that model. So it's the act of taking the data set and then shoving it through a bunch of GPUs and coming out with a model at the end. You normally take 70% of that data, as I said, run it through PyTorch or something like that, and it comes out with the model. Then you take that 30% of the other last bit of the data and you check against it. And the closer to 1.0 or 100%, the better you are. What does that mean? That means that you verify using the clean data set that it is getting you the answers you expect it to have. So it's not exactly like school, but it's very close to that. And that allows you to churn through this. That's one reason why foundational models and all these different models you see out on Hugging Face, they all have different flavors to them, right? So there's only a handful of foundational models out there that are verified by different companies, i.e. IBM and our narrative with the Granite model, for instance, where we have said we have built off of a clean data set that you can use Granite with our lawyers behind it to do the work that you're looking to do. There's a bunch of models on Hugging Face that are built with open source software or open source data sets, but you have no way of knowing what that data set is, and you have to trust that that data set doesn't have copyrighted material inside of it or unattributed source code inside of it. There's a lot of really sticky places when you start looking at through the enterprise lens, where people don't recognize this until either way too late or way too early and not willing to take that risk. So I'm here to tell you that there are paths through this. especially with the way at least in the US, the copyright law works. We're trying to answer this question in the correct way. There's a lot of ways of doing it out there, and IBM believes that we have the right path here. That's where our foundational models like Granite come into play. So I kept talking about models as a whole, right? Like you think of it as just like a brain to be able to do this stuff. But let's shift some gears here and talk about the different types of models. And a lot of people understand the chat GPTs of the world where you can ask us some questions. Well, I'm going to tell you a story, a different style of models out there that kind of fill. And these also have different data sets that require them to be trained this way, right? Because obviously training it all on text data, coming out expecting source code is a different conversation. But there's different buckets of models out there. So if you're imagining different types of, beer out there, there are ales and lagers, right? And there are different types of models just the same. So let's talk about this a little bit more. NLP, or natural language processing, is kind of the one that most people associate themselves with AI as a whole, right? It's the ability to take, ability for computers to take and understand human language and process it, right? Natural language processing kind of makes sense. This is pretty much where everyone has most exposure to it. Like when you talk to your different AI systems out there, it's got to process that language and broken up into smaller categories and be able to work with them. So there's different portions of it, and one of the first ones is what we're going to talk about is sentiment right here. And sentiment is right here. First of all, is all the code you need, which is what 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of Python code using something called transformers from Hugging Face, where you can use the sentiment model to see how positive or negative a line is, right? So for instance, I've been waiting all year to teach you about AI. I'd imagine that'd be pretty positive, right? Like that's a relatively positive statement because I'm excited about it, right? But I've been waiting, so that is a little negative because I'm having to do a little bit more. But it's the idea of being able to give the temperature of statements back and forth, where if you are running, for instance, at an enterprise, a bunch of chat questions, or for that matter, a call center, and you want to transcribe all these things, and you wanted to see an aggregate space of how well your customer service is doing. Sentiment's a great opportunity for that, right? I know it's a very simple one and kind of makes sense, but there's other opportunities where you can leverage this kind of stuff, which is really, really neat. So it's important to recognize that this exists out there, and with only 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of Python, you actually get this working. And what does that mean? Well, let's actually see it get to work, right? I mean, that's kind of the fun part of this all. So let me bring this over here. I'm going to, all right. So what I'm going to go ahead and do source venv this, oops, source bin activate. So we have that sentiment right here, right? I added a little bit more to it. There we go. And as you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and do Python sentiment.py. And it's going to go out there and come back as a positive score here, right? With a score of only 55. So it's kind of like, it's positive, but it's not really, really positive, right? So let's play with it for a second here and say, I'm extremely excited to teach you about AI, right? There we go. As you can see, the positive here and the score of 99%, which is pretty high, right? And then on the flip side, I'm going to go ahead and turn this into extremely sad to come back to say that that is 99% negative, right? So what does that mean, right? Well, I mean, all I did was just run a bunch of sentences through, but I think that's the next point. I'm running this on my laptop and I'm asking it questions directly or to ask the temperature of that statement, right? You have a bunch of them. You can come back with some very, very interesting opportunities there. Okay. So the next type of NLP out there is something called summarization. What is summarization? It is the, I'm going to age myself here, but there's a system called Cliff Notes back in the day, right? Where you would get your school would tell you to read a book, like for instance, Oliver Twist, and you see how long that was, and you're like, this is way too long. How am I going to read all this? You'd go buy something called Cliff Notes, which was a little yellow book. It was a summarized version of the book for you. That is exactly what this is here. It uses AI to summarize a bunch of information and condense it down to readable chunks. There's some really interesting stories out there with people using it to bring down whole legal documents into bullet points, or just to get the high level of it. There's some really, really strong stories of summarization. People really do love it. But you do also need to verify stuff, because with summarization, you do end up losing context, and you end up losing why that is important. So, you know, with all tools out there, know when to use it, when not to use it. This is, the next version is called text generation. And what is text generation? This is kind of where most people got first introduced to the AI ecosystem, right? Like, okay, fine, you might have it on your phone to do like the predictive text or whatever. But when you start playing with AI from like ChatGPT or whatever, and all the different versions out there, you start trying to generate stuff. You might generate a sonnet or a haiku on something. Well, this one right here with just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code, you basically have your own personal text generator on your laptop. Granted, admittedly, it is running a very old version of a model here, but that's here nor there, right? The idea is that you can leverage this stuff. So if I bring this back over here and show you this right here, it's the exact same code, but I just added a little bit more length to it, and also, you know, brought it out so it's a little bit easier to read here. So if I come along here and do Python text generation, it goes off, and that did not. Oh, here we go. I don't know why I had all those text that right here, but a developer advocate's main job is figuring out what the situation is all about, and the new developer releases a new, more accurate description of what is. I don't know. That's just gibberish, right? But that's with many of these text generators, is that it's trying to guess what the next word is. So it's not going to be great, right? So if I come along and bring up this again and say, tell me a story about how AI helped humanity. Let's see what happens here. I know I wouldn't have to think about it in the way it wasn't already in the map. I've been able to write an article and helping. It's definitely the same thing. Hacking. Again, this is all just gibberish, right? Like, this doesn't make sense. And this brings in the whole conversation of prompt engineering and the ability to kind of coax out from the AI what you're trying to ask it. And it's important to recognize that this is still an emerging technology, but eventually we'll be able to actually ask the right questions to be able to build from there. Okay, let's keep going. So I'm right about the 20-minute mark here, and I was hoping to get to get some instructlab work, but I will go through this a little bit quicker so we can get to that point. After we talk about NLP, the next portion is something called computer vision. What is computer vision? It's the ability to have a computer basically use its ability to figure things out for you, right? For instance, this is image segmentation. This is from a project called KKit from IBM also, where it's a really neat little system there. But what has it done here? It intelligently figured out that there are two different. There's a dog and a cat inside of this photo, and then split it for us. So image segmentation, which is great, right? Like, so when you have really large pictures of a bunch of different, very specific things, the AI is smart enough to like cut it apart so you don't have to. If you have thousands and thousands of pictures, it's a lot of work on your side. But if the AI can do it for you, well, good on you, right? Like, it'll make your life significantly easier. Next one, if you've ever seen Silicon Valley, this is actually an image from it, but it is very true. It's called image classification. Hot dog, not a hot dog, right? You take a picture of a hot dog, and it figures out if it's a hot dog or not a hot dog. This is a running joke in the AI ecosystem because of the TV show, but it is really a really good really good representation of image classification. Take a picture of it, push it through the model, tells you whether or not if it's a hot dog or not a hot dog. That opens up a lot more doors when you start thinking about it at a macro level, but it is a core value of image computer vision. The next one off of that too is something called object detection, right? Like this is actually where it starts getting interesting for society as a whole. So obviously with image segmentation and image classification, it's already doing part of this work, right? To detect objects. As you can see here, you've got a cup, you've got a bowl, you've got a laptop, you've got a vase, which is different than a cup, a bottle, which is different than a vase, a wine glass, a chair. This opens up some really interesting conversations. So when AI starts looking out and using object detection, imagine a bunch of street cameras, right? And all of a sudden we see a car have an accident, and object detection recognizes the car is upside down, and then or car is crashed, or there's smoke coming out of the car. It can send out emergency services to that location because it's like, oh, there's obviously someone in trouble there. Let's send it that way, which is great, right? Like that's so 911 operator just needs to like recognize that it's there. And so when somebody calls 911, they're like, yep, we already have EMS already out on the way or whatever, which is great. But that also brings in a dark side of it, right? Like when you start detecting things at a macro level, you can use this for some evilness too. So object detection is very much a double-edged sword, but it's important to recognize that with even open source models now, we can do this, which is pretty dang cool. So keep that in the back of your mind. So now that we've talked about the kind of the focused models, let's talk about multi-model. So you can actually smash these models together to start building out really interesting stories here. For instance, text to image. That's that DALL-E thing. If you remember this little logo up in the corner here. When you started asking the models for, create me an armchair in the shape of an avocado, and it comes back with a bunch of different options, right? Or I believe John Oliver, the comedian, created a bunch of models about him falling in love and marrying a head of lettuce. By the way, it's a really good conversation around AI on that one too. But it's important to recognize that this does exist, because what does it do? It uses natural language processing and then does some image generation off the back of it, right? Which is important. It's a multi-model. So a lot of people find these really fun. There's some really interesting stories around that, and every day this stuff is getting a little bit better, which is always nice. And then finally, there's text to video here. This was a NVIDIA demo here that I still have never gotten my hands on, but they asked it to create a video. It was like a 30-second long video of a stormtrooper vacuuming a beach, and this is what happened. the model that they created a 30-second video of a stormtrooper walking around vacuuming a beach, which is bizarre, right? But it's still possible. And since this presentation, this specific one, which was a couple of years ago now, they've gone gangbusters off of this stuff. There's a lot of videos out there that are now AI generated with very realistic things. But the fingers are still a thing. Still take a look at the fingers of the people inside the videos. That's usually a good way to tell if it's AI generated or not. For whatever reason, AI models still can't just understand fingers. So it's always interesting to see. Oops. So, and then with that, let's play with some instructlab. I'm going to set up instructlab on my laptop and then spin it up and talk to the Granite model, the foundational model we were talking about earlier, and just to show you how easy it is to get up and running. And this is going to be all real time. I'm going to be doing this on my actual laptop. I'm not going to speed the video up or anything like that. So you see how quickly it is. And then from there, hopefully this will be enough interest. And then we can, hopefully you might want to reach out with some questions. So let's come back over here. And as we saw earlier, I only have 2 things in this directory. And then bring up my notes here. I am going to just run these all as one big command, but I'll talk about what's happening here in just a second. As you can see here, I'm creating a directory called instructlab. I'm going to cd into it. I'm going to create a new virtual environment, activate it. I'm going to install pip install instructlab. I'm going to remove this llama CCP Python, which is one of the ways we host the model. And then because I'm running on a Mac M3, I'm going to use Apple Metal here. So I use my GPU. And that's all it is. So I'm going to go ahead and run that right now. And as you see, I have much of the stuff cached because I've done this a few times. This does take a couple seconds on when you're bringing it down from the internet. It goes off, does the work. And while that's going, I will go ahead and, if you've never seen the instructlab website, just while this is going, so we're not just staring at a screen together here. This is the Google page, or GitHub page, which is nice. We also have this nice little website here that you can go to instructlab.ai. And it gives you a nice little overview of what's going on. I always strongly suggest taking a look at it, but the majority of everything here is inside of instructlab, the GitHub page. You may have seen this error. That's fine. Don't worry about it. This is just dependency problems, which is not a huge deal. So with this, I have nothing in here. So what I'll do is in ilab, which is the main command here, just to show you that it's actually installed and running. There we go. And if I do which ilab, this should be the local venv. Here we go. ctemp instructlab, and there we go. Just installed. I'm going to come along and do an init config here. So I'm configuring the environment, for it, and it's going to ask about a taxonomy. What is a taxonomy? That is a collection of knowledge that we will be able to eventually talk to. Now, if you notice here, there is this taxonomy repo. This is a publicly supported and publicly maintained taxonomy repo for fine-tuning your local knowledge. This is a whole conversation inside of itself. So if you have any questions or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, so now that we have this, we should have a taxonomy repo, which we do. And then I'm going to go ahead and download the Granite model here. The Granite model is the open source model from IBM, where we will 100% stand behind it and say that it is okay to use for all your different states of using AI work. And then you can train off of it using instructlab. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just just bring it up and show you how easy it is to talk to it directly. And then if you're more interested in fine-tuning, there's other models or there's other videos on this channel, or reach out and there's many different resources to go for it. Yeah, here we go. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and go to okay. So I pulled the model down. I'm going to go ahead and host it now. Just on my local laptop here. There we go. As you can see, port 8000. You can even go to the docs here, and there is a Swagger API. Give that a second to come up. Don't know why it's taking so long. So I'll do ahead and go to iLab model chat. There we go. As you can see, I'm talking to the Granite model here, and I'll say, what is the capital of Texas? There we go. And then who is Batman? There we go. So I'm talking to the model, but as you can see, just to prove to you that this is talking to the same model, as you can see, error failed because it can't talk to it. So what did I prove here? I proved that I just pulled down a model and started talking to it just as a local model here. But I've also set up instructlab in the process, which gives you the ability to do some real training off of this too, which is pretty cool. If you watch the next video, which will be above me now, hopefully, you'll see how we fine tune a model with it. And then with that, you'll be able to do quite a bit more stuff and teach it some things and give it to your own knowledge, which is pretty dang cool. So hopefully this has been relatively useful, and hopefully gave you enough base knowledge to build off of so you can turn around and maybe join the AI revolution and start helping us out inside of the instructlab ecosystem, or fine-tuning models to do some useful stuff. If you have any questions or thoughts, never hesitate to reach out. And I look forward to talking to you in the future. Bye.